I grew up believing family was unshakable, the kind of bond that weathered every storm. My father had drilled that belief into me from the time I could walk. Money comes and goes, he would always say, but blood stays. As the younger sibling, I clung to that mantra. I admired my father's work ethic. He built everything from the ground up, brick by brick, through sheer determination. To me, he was more than a provider. He was proof that integrity could survive in a world that often rewarded greed. My sister, Emma, was 3 years older. On the surface, she and I were close. She'd braid my hair when I was little, share her clothes when I got older, and stand beside me during family gatherings like the perfect protective sibling. To anyone else, she was the image of a caring sister. But underneath those polished smiles, there were moments, fleeting but unforgettable, when I'd catch her eyes narrowing at me, as though my very existence threatened her spotlight. I used to brush it off as sibling rivalry. What sister doesn't get jealous once in a while? Despite those subtle cracks, I trusted her with everything. I worked part-time jobs through college, determined to carve my own path, while she leaned comfortably into the lifestyle our father provided. He never criticized her. Instead, he believed she'd eventually find her footing. I thought it was only natural that he treated us differently. Emma was older, after all, and he worried about her more. Our father wasn't just a man of wealth. He was a man of principles. He came from nothing and often reminded us how easily life could take everything back if we weren't careful. "The real inheritance I'll leave you," he'd tell us around the dinner table, "is my name. Protect it, honor it. That's worth more than gold." Still, we knew there would be something material when the time came. My father's estate, his businesses, properties, and savings, represented decades of sacrifice. It wasn't greed that made me think of it. It was pride. I knew every dollar in his accounts carried the weight of his sweat and long nights. He didn't hand us luxuries. He gave us opportunities. That distinction mattered to me. Emma, though, had a different relationship with his success. She basked in it, flaunted it among her friends, and treated his achievements as though they were hers by default. When he praised my hard work, her smile would tighten, almost brittle. Sometimes she'd dismiss me with a laugh, saying, "Don't try so hard. Dad's always going to take care of us anyway." I never argued. I trusted her. I trusted him. I trusted that when the time came, everything would be handled fairly, because fairness was at the heart of who my father was. The last conversation I had with him before he passed still echoes in my mind. He held my hand, his voice weak but steady. "Whatever happens, remember, I've taken care of you both. Don't let anyone come between you." I promised him I wouldn't. At the time, I couldn't imagine a world where my sister would test that vow. The day of the will reading felt unreal. Like I was walking through someone else's story. Grief still sat heavy in my chest, the kind that steals your breath without warning. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old paper, a strangely sterile place for something as intimate as my father's final words. My sister Emma walked in beside me, draped in black silk, every detail of her appearance meticulously arranged. Even in mourning, she had a way of making everything feel like a performance. We sat across from the lawyer, a man who had been in our family's orbit for decades. His face was grave, but I could sense the weight of familiarity in his eyes. He shuffled a stack of papers, cleared his throat, and began reading my father's last testament. At first, everything sounded expected, tributes to his life, instructions about his businesses, and words of love for both his daughters. But then, the words shifted. "I hereby leave the entirety of my estate, including financial assets, properties, and holdings, to my eldest daughter, Emma." The air seemed to collapse around me. I blinked, certain I had misheard, but the lawyer kept reading, his voice steady, deliberate. Every sentence cut deeper. All accounts, all properties, every last piece of my father's tangible legacy went to her. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, but not in shock. Her lips trembled with a smile she struggled to hide, and her eyes gleamed with a satisfaction she quickly masked with a theatrical sob. She reached for my hand, squeezing it with mock sympathy. "Oh, sweetie, I didn't know Dad would do this." "I'm so sorry." Her voice was honeyed poison. I pulled my hand back, my throat tight. The lawyer finished the reading, offering his condolences, but the words barely reached me. All I could hear was the echo of my father's promise. "I've taken care of you both." Had I misunderstood him? Had he looked me in the eyes and lied on his deathbed? The thought shattered me in a way grief alone never could. Emma leaned in, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Don't worry. I'll make sure you're comfortable. Maybe I'll let you stay in one of the guest houses." The smirk that tugged at the corner of her mouth made my stomach churn. Every polite condolence she gave in front of the lawyer was laced with cruelty once his eyes turned away. She was basking in triumph, the perfect actress, while I sat there drowning in humiliation. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice was gone, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. When we left the office, Emma linked her arm through mine, guiding me out as though she were the grieving, generous sister protecting the weaker one. To the world, she looked like an angel carrying me through tragedy. To me, she was a thief who had just robbed me of my father's legacy, and smiled while doing it. That day, I buried not just my father, but also every shred of trust I had ever placed in her. The days after the will reading blurred together, but Emma made sure I never forgot my place. She moved quickly into father's estate, parading through the halls like a queen claiming her throne. Every decision she made was laced with arrogance. Renovations, parties, even redecorating his study, the one sacred space I thought she'd at least preserve. The worst incident came just 2 weeks after the funeral. I had gone back to the house to pick up a few personal belongings, family photos, keepsakes, things that held more meaning than value. Emma greeted me at the door with a glass of champagne in hand, dressed in a designer gown I'd never seen before. Laughter spilled out from inside. She was hosting a lavish dinner party. "Don't mind the mess," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm just celebrating. Well, life." I told her I only wanted father's old watch, the one he promised me on my 18th birthday. She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Oh, that old thing? I sold it last week. It didn't suit me." My chest tightened. "You sold it?" She smirked, swirling her champagne. "Darling, it was just a trinket. Besides, everything here belongs to me now. You really need to move on." Her words were sharp enough to cut bone. But it was the casual way she dismissed our father's memory that broke something inside me. The guests behind her laughed and clinked glasses, oblivious to the storm building in my chest. I turned and walked out, the echo of their celebration chasing me into the night. That was the moment the grief I'd been carrying twisted into something darker, rage. For days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every corner of my apartment felt suffocating, haunted by father's words. "I've taken care of you both." How could that promise end in this humiliation? My despair sank so deep it scared me, but underneath it, a flicker of resolve began to glow. Emma, meanwhile, only grew bolder. She posted photos of her extravagant lifestyle online, flaunting cars, jewelry, and vacations, all purchased with what she claimed was her rightful inheritance. Friends congratulated her, and she basked in their admiration, the victorious heiress. She thought she had won, that I would fade quietly into the shadows while she enjoyed everything she had stolen. But grief has a way of sharpening a person, of turning pain into fuel. And when the phone rang one evening, the voice on the other end shattered the despair that had nearly consumed me. It was the lawyer. His tone was calm, almost cautious. "There's something we need to discuss," he said. "Your father left you something hidden, something your sister doesn't know about." In that moment, the fog in my mind cleared. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with purpose. For the first time since father's death, I felt alive. Emma thought she had buried me beneath her greed, but she had no idea what was coming. I hung up the phone, my lips curling into a grim smile. It's payback time. The next morning, I met the lawyer in his office, the same place where my world had shattered weeks earlier. This time, though, his eyes carried a weight of secrecy, as if he were about to hand me a key to a locked door. "Your father trusted me with a separate document," he began, sliding a thin folder across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were deeds, account numbers, and letters in my father's handwriting. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. He had left me a hidden fortune, not in the flashy public way Emma received hers, but quietly, deliberately. A private trust, shares in companies under my name, and a secluded property that Emma's inheritance couldn't touch. My father hadn't forgotten me. He had protected me in his own way, shielding what was mine from her greed. He always worried about how competitive your sister could be, the lawyer explained gently. He wanted to ensure you had something safe away from her reach. For the first time since the funeral, I breathed deeply. Relief flooded me, but with it came something else, power. Emma had gloated, humiliated me, treated me as though I were disposable. Yet here I was, holding proof that she hadn't won, not even close. At first, I considered confronting her. I imagined walking into one of her glittering parties, dropping the folder on the table and watching her perfect smile crack. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized confrontation would be too easy for her. She would twist it, spin the narrative until she still came out the victim and I the bitter sibling. No. My revenge had to be quieter, sharper, something she wouldn't see until it was too late. I spent nights at my small kitchen table, sketching out ideas. I read through Father's letters carefully. His words carried not just love, but guidance. He wanted me to honor his legacy by being smart, not spiteful. I took that to heart. My revenge wouldn't be reckless, it would be poetic justice. Emma thrived on appearances. Her identity was built on wealth, admiration, and the illusion of being untouchable. What better way to unravel her than to let her arrogance consume her while I rose in silence? I began moving pieces carefully. I invested Father's shares wisely, building quiet success under my own name. I renovated the property he left me, turning it into something profitable. All the while, I stayed out of Emma's sight, letting her believe I was struggling in the shadow of her grandeur, and the more she flaunted her new lifestyle, her designer clothes, her lavish parties, her smug little comments online, the more satisfying it became to know what was waiting just beyond her vision. I was no longer the naive sibling who trusted blindly. I was my father's child, armed with patience, strategy, and the quiet certainty that Emma's downfall wouldn't come from me forcing it. It would come from her never seeing me as a threat until it was too late. The stage was set. It didn't happen all at once. Emma's downfall came the way winter creeps into autumn, slowly at first, then all at once, leaving everything cold and barren. She had built her empire of appearances on the surface of Father's inheritance, but underneath, it was hollow. She threw money at everything: designer gowns, extravagant parties, fake friends who clung to her like moths to a flame. For a while it worked. Her social media gleamed with luxury. People called her successful, envied her lifestyle. She thrived on it, but arrogance blinds. And Emma, drunk on her own sense of victory, never thought to be cautious. The investments she bragged about were little more than scams dressed up with glossy brochures. Her friends whispered advice not because they cared, but because they saw an opportunity to bleed her dry. I watched from the sidelines as the cracks widened. It started with whispers, rumors of failed deals, unpaid contractors, mounting debts. She brushed them off with the same smirk she had worn the day she sold Father's watch. But soon the whispers turned into headlines. Her name, once associated with glamour, began to appear alongside words like foreclosure and fraud. And I was thriving in silence. My father's hidden legacy had become the foundation of something real: steady investments, flourishing businesses, a quiet life free from the circus Emma had built around herself. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't need to. My success spoke in the comfort of stability, in the knowledge that I had honored his wisdom instead of squandering it. The day Emma finally confronted me, she was a shadow of the sister I once knew. Her hair was unkempt, her once perfect wardrobe replaced with whatever she hadn't sold to cover her debts. She stormed into my office, a space I had built with Father's quiet fortune, her eyes wild with disbelief. "You knew," she spat, slamming her hands on my desk. "You had something all along." I leaned back, calm in the face of her fury. Yes, Father made sure of it. Her face twisted, fury and humiliation battling for dominance. "He gave me everything." "Everything! And what did you do?" Sit back and wait to watch me fail? I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. No, Emma, I worked. I built something. While you were busy chasing applause, I was honoring Father's name. That was his real gift. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. She realized then that she hadn't just lost money. She had lost the one thing she craved most: power over me. Her downfall wasn't in the empty bank accounts or the broken friendships. It was in the way she looked at me that day, furious, humiliated, powerless. For the first time in our lives, she wasn't the one holding all the cards, and I didn't need revenge in the form of cruel words or dramatic scenes. My existence, thriving quietly, unshaken, was enough to dismantle her piece by piece. Emma had won the inheritance battle, but I had won the war. In the months that followed Emma's downfall, life settled into a quiet rhythm I hadn't known in years. For the first time since Father's death, I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. My days weren't filled with bitterness or comparison anymore. They were filled with purpose. I poured myself into the businesses Father had entrusted to me, expanding them with care, always guided by the principles he had lived by: hard work, humility, and honor. It was strange, really. Revenge had never been about outspending Emma or proving I could outshine her. The deeper I went into my father's legacy, the more I understood that he hadn't wanted us to inherit wealth alone. He wanted us to inherit wisdom. He had hidden my share not to punish Emma, but to protect me from her greed, and maybe even from myself. The revenge, as sweet as it was, had turned out to be less about watching Emma lose and more about reclaiming my dignity. She had tried to reduce me to nothing, a poor sibling clinging to scraps of memory, but Father had left me with the tools to rise quietly, to prove that strength doesn't come from flaunting wealth but from carrying it with grace. Emma, on the other hand, had become a ghost of herself. The friends who once clung to her vanished the moment her money did. The party stopped. The laughter turned into whispers behind her back. She lived in the shadow of the empire she had squandered, isolated and bitter. I heard about her occasionally, selling jewelry, moving from one rental to another, always chasing the illusion of the life she had lost. Sometimes, I wondered if she thought about that day in the lawyer's office, when she had clutched my hand with fake sympathy and declared herself the victor. Did she remember the look in my eyes when she boasted about selling Father's watch? Did she ever realize that her arrogance was the weapon that destroyed her? I never gloated. I never needed to. My success spoke for itself, not in glittering displays or social media posts, but in the steady, fulfilling life I built for myself. That, I realized, was the truest form of justice, living well while the person who tried to break you drowns in the consequences of their own choices. Father's last words still echoed in my mind. I've taken care of you both. Don't let anyone come between you. At first, I thought those words were broken. Now I understood. He hadn't failed me. He had trusted me to rise above. Standing in the study of my own home one evening, I held his old letters in my hands and felt a calm I hadn't known since before he passed. Revenge wasn't just about money or even about winning. It was about reclaiming what Emma tried to steal from me: my sense of worth, my father's faith, and my peace. As I looked out the window at the quiet night, one truth settled deep in my chest, steady and unshakable. She stole the inheritance, but she could never steal my legacy.